Sand has a way of getting into everything in Egypt. Your shoes, your equipment, your certainties. After 15 years of archaeological work in the Giza complex, I thought I'd developed an immunity to its constant intrusion. But as I calibrated our new thermal imaging array on that October morning, watching pixels resolve into patterns across my laptop screen, I realized some discoveries could still slip past all my carefully constructed defenses. "Dr. Morrison, you need to see this." Alice, my postdoc, had that tone in her voice, the one that usually meant equipment malfunction. The rising sun cast shadows across our mobile scanning station, positioned just northeast of the Great Pyramid's base. I squinted at her monitor, trying to focus through my third coffee of the morning. "Another tourist heat signature?" "No, sir. Look at the depth readings." The thermal mapping was part of a routine UNESCO survey, the kind of work that keeps funding flowing while rarely yielding anything beyond confirmation of known structures. But the heat signature on Alice's screen was anything but routine. Approximately 40 meters below ground level, well beneath any known chamber, a distinct thermal anomaly glowed consistently. "Run it again," I said, falling back on the first rule of archaeological physics. Verify everything. Full spectrum this time. While Alice recalibrated, I pulled up our structural maps of the pyramid's interior. 15 years of ground-penetrating radar, muon radiography, and infrared thermography had given us what we thought was a complete picture of the pyramid's internal structure. This reading simply didn't fit. "Second scan showing identical results, Dr. Morrison." Alice's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper. "The pattern. It's not random." She was right. The heat signature fluctuated with mathematical precision, a rhythm that made my skin crawl with its artificiality. I'd spent my career debunking pseudo-scientific claims about the pyramids, writing papers dismantling ancient astronaut theories with hard data and rigorous methodology. Now I was staring at something that refused to fit into any acceptable archaeological framework. "Pack up the sensitive equipment," I said, already reaching for my phone. "And Alice, not a word about this to anyone." The next 48 hours were marked by constant phone calls, emails, and last-minute meetings. My first call was to Dr. Sterling at the Supreme Council of Antiquities, a man who'd become both colleague and friend over the years. His initial skepticism mirrored my own, but the data spoke for itself. "James, you understand what this could mean?" Sterling's voice crackled over the secure line we'd established. "If this is real—" "It's real!" I interrupted, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. "We've run every possible verification. Whatever's down there, it's not a natural formation or known archaeological feature." The call ended with Sterling promising to expedite the necessary permits while maintaining absolute secrecy. But in Egypt, secrets have a way of multiplying like grains of sand in a windstorm. By sunset the next day, our small research station had grown into a small compound. Additional scanning equipment arrived under the guise of routine maintenance, along with a carefully selected team of specialists. Dr. Mary Winters, the leading expert in archaeological thermodynamics, arrived from Singapore. Dr. Klaus Weber, whose work in experimental geology had revolutionized our understanding of ancient building techniques, flew in from Berlin. "The energy signature is completely anomalous," Winters said during our first team briefing, pulling up comparative analyses on her tablet. "It's not geological, not biological, and certainly not from any known human technology." Weber nodded, his usual Germanic stoicism cracking slightly. "The surrounding rock structure shows evidence of extreme compression, far beyond what we believe the ancient Egyptians were capable of achieving." I stood at the head of our conference table, studying the faces of my colleagues. We were all scientists, trained to question, to doubt, to demand evidence. But there was something else in their expressions now, a combination of excitement and fear that I felt in my own chest. The Egyptian military established a perimeter under the pretense of archaeological site protection. But I noticed the special forces insignias on their uniforms. Tourist access to the pyramid was restricted, citing restoration work. Press inquiries were deflected with practiced ease. Then came the first conflict with the authorities. The American government has expressed significant interest in your findings, Dr. Morrison. Colonel Mansour didn't look up from the satellite photos spread across his desk. As have the Chinese, the Russians, and half a dozen other nations. This is an archaeological site, Colonel, not a military installation. He finally met my eyes. Everything in Egypt is a matter of national security, Doctor. Especially discoveries that generate this much international attention. I left his office with permission to continue our work, but under significantly tighter restrictions. Additional military personnel appeared at our compound, their presence a constant reminder of the growing stakes. The academic community began to stir as rumors leaked out. My inbox filled with inquiries from colleagues ranging from genuine concern to barely veiled skepticism. The text from my ex-wife didn't help. Sarah saw something online about Giza. Please tell me you haven't gone full ancient aliens. I hadn't spoken to our daughter in months. Now I stared at my phone, wondering how to explain what we were finding when I couldn't even explain it to myself. The breaking point came 3 weeks into the investigation. Our refined scans had revealed a chamber roughly cubic in shape, sealed by material that defied our best attempts at analysis. The heat signature maintained its precise rhythm, and now we were detecting weak radiation patterns that correlated with cosmic background radiation. We need to go in. I said it during our morning briefing, cutting through the careful scientific discussions. All this remote sensing is giving us data, but we need direct access. The team's reaction was mixed. Winters and Weber supported the idea, while others argued for more comprehensive scanning. The military observers in the room remained silent, but I saw them exchanging glances. James. Sterling took me aside after the meeting. You understand that once we breach that chamber, there's no going back. Whatever we find. I completed his thought. Will change everything. The decision was made. As our team prepared for the first direct exploration of the chamber, I found myself alone in my quarters, staring at my reflection in the small bathroom mirror. The man looking back at me had more grey in his beard than I remembered, deeper lines around his eyes. My entire career had been built on proving what wasn't true about the pyramids. I'd earned my reputation by demolishing fantasies with facts, by replacing mystery with methodology. Now, as we stood on the brink of what might be the most significant archaeological discovery in human history, I had to face the possibility that some of those mysteries deserved their status. The next morning, as our team assembled the specialized drilling equipment that would give us our first physical access to the chamber, I noticed my hands were steady. The scientist in me was ready to document, analyze, and understand. But another part of me, a part I'd long suppressed under layers of academic rigor, was awakening to a simple, terrifying truth. Some discoveries don't just change what we know. They change who we are. The drill bit began to turn, and with it, my carefully constructed world began to rotate on a new axis. Whatever waited below, sealed in its perfect cubic chamber, was about to force all of us to reconsider what we thought we knew about human history, about civilization, about our place in the universe. I didn't know it then, but that moment marked the last time I would think of sand as my biggest problem in Egypt. After 3 days of careful drilling and micro-camera surveys, we'd finally breached the chamber wall. The opening was barely wide enough for our smallest probe, but the images it sent back left us speechless. "That's not possible," Dr. Winters whispered, breaking our stunned silence. On the monitor before us, the probe's light illuminated what appeared to be a perfectly polished surface, black as deep space, but somehow reflective, stretching away in geometrically precise angles. I found myself reaching out to touch the monitor, a gesture so unprofessional it made me pull back sharply. Temperature reading? Holding steady at 18.3 degrees Celsius, Alice reported, her voice tight with concentration. No variation across the surface. It's like it's actively maintaining its temperature. The material defied every analysis we attempted. Mass spectrometry readings came back garbled. Radiation sensors detected patterns that made our quantum physicists shake their heads in disbelief. When we finally managed to obtain a sample, it seemed to change properties depending on how we tried to measure it. That was when the first disappearance occurred. Dr. Weber went missing between the evening briefing and his scheduled morning shift. His quarters were untouched, his laptop still running complex simulations. The military investigation found nothing, but I noticed increased security personnel appearing around the compound, their uniforms lacking any identifying insignia. This isn't a coincidence. Winters confronted me in the lab 3 days later, her voice low but intense. First, Weber disappears. Then his preliminary analysis of the chamber material vanishes from our servers, and now these new security consultants are everywhere. I glanced at the corner where 2 of said consultants maintained their constant watch. We knew this would attract attention. Attention is one thing, this is... She stopped abruptly as one of the guards shifted position. Just be careful with the latest readings, especially the ones from the central structure. The central structure. We'd taken to using euphemisms for the sarcophagus-like object our scans had revealed at the chamber's heart. Its discovery had marked the beginning of the real changes in our operation. I was analyzing those very readings late that night when the first energy surge occurred. Every piece of electronic equipment in the compound screamed to life simultaneously. My laptop display warped with surreal colors before going black. I shouted into my radio, already running toward the chamber access point. Static answered me. The scene at the entrance was controlled chaos. Military personnel rushed to establish a perimeter while research team members huddled around dead equipment. Through the narrow shaft we drilled, a soft luminescence blinked with the same rhythm as our original heat signature. It's responding! Winters appeared at my elbow, her tablet displaying the only working screen I could see. Look at these patterns. The energy readings formed perfect sine waves, their frequency shifting in what appeared to be ordered sequences, not random fluctuations communication. Dr. Morrison, one of the military observers, I'd never learned his name, strode toward us. This area is now restricted. All personnel are to return to the compound immediately. Like hell, I started, but Winters' hand on my arm stopped me. James, she whispered, the signal. It's not just coming from here anymore. She was right. Reports began flooding in over the next few hours. Similar energy signatures had been detected at archaeological sites across Egypt. Then from Teotihuacan, Xi'an, dozens of locations worldwide, all seemingly responding to whatever had awakened in our chamber. The compound transformed overnight. New equipment arrived in unmarked trucks. Teams of technicians set up arrays of sophisticated monitoring devices. Our regular military guards were replaced by serious-faced men who moved with the practiced efficiency of special operations forces. I found myself effectively quarantined in the research hub with what remained of my core team, surrounded by screens displaying data we couldn't fully comprehend. The energy pulses continued, getting stronger, forming patterns that our linguists swore had syntactic structure. It's counting down, Dr. Anderson, our quantum physicist, announced one morning. She'd been analyzing the signal patterns for 48 hours straight. Her eyes red-rimmed but bright with excitement or fear. I couldn't tell which. These sequences, they're not just communication, they're coordinates, timing sequences. Whatever's in that chamber, it's preparing for something. The military observers who'd been hovering nearby immediately moved to confiscate her data, but she'd already sent her findings to every team member's personal devices. They could control our official channels, but they couldn't stop us from understanding what we'd discovered. That understanding came at a price. Our more sophisticated scans had revealed something we'd initially missed, a dense spherical mass at the heart of the sarcophagus-like structure, roughly the size of a basketball. It emanated complex energy signatures. Dr. Anderson's initial analysis suggested it was some kind of power source, though its composition and mechanics contradicted conventional physics. The sphere's energy output had been stable at first, but that changed rapidly. Random power surges began disrupting our equipment. Each surge became progressively stronger, creating electromagnetic pulses that fried delicate sensors and corrupted data storage. The military's hardened equipment proved equally vulnerable. "The energy readings are becoming critical," I reported during an emergency team meeting, spreading out the latest data. "These patterns suggest a cascading reaction. If we don't intervene, the buildup could breach containment. Or it could stabilize," one of the military observers argued. But his voice lacked conviction. Their own instruments were showing the same alarming trends, exponential increases in both frequency and intensity of the surges. "We have to open it," I said firmly. "Whatever's happening in there, it's accelerating. At least with direct access, we might have a chance to understand and contain it." The military observers exchanged glances. After a brief consultation in whispered Arabic, the senior officer nodded grimly. "I will contact my superiors. But understand, Dr. Morrison, if this goes wrong, it goes wrong for everyone." Permission came from levels of government I hadn't known existed. The breach was scheduled for dawn. Our team worked through the night, checking and rechecking equipment, running through procedures we'd designed for a scenario no one had ever encountered before. The military presence had grown overwhelming, with spotlights illuminating the plateau and helicopter gunships circling overhead. Standing at the chamber entrance, watching the first rays of sun paint the pyramid's ancient stones, I felt the weight of millennia pressing down. Somewhere above, tourists would soon arrive to take their photos and tell their stories. They had no idea that beneath their feet, we were about to change human history forever. "Primary sensors online." Winters' voice came through my headset, steady despite everything. "Environmental controls stable. Ready when you are, James." I took one last look at my team, the ones still here, still fighting to understand, and gave the order that would end one chapter of human history and begin another. "Open it." The engineering team moved with practiced precision, activating the hydraulic system we'd spent weeks designing. The chamber's unusual material had resisted conventional drilling methods, but our analysis had revealed something unexpected. It responded to specific frequencies of vibration. The massive door, seamlessly integrated into the chamber wall, began to shift, not swing or slide, but rather seemed to flow, as if the molecular structure of the material itself was reorganizing. The process took exactly 7 minutes and 23 seconds, though it felt like hours. "Environmental readings?" I asked, my voice tighter than I'd have liked. "Atmospheric pressure normalizing," Winters reported from her station. "Air composition nearly identical to outside. Temperature steady at 18.3 degrees. No detected pathogens or unusual compounds." The opening revealed a perfectly geometric space, roughly cube-shaped, its walls made of the same black material as the door. But it was the object at its center that commanded every eye. The sarcophagus we detected wasn't exactly a sarcophagus at all. It was more like a quartz pod, elevated on a platform of the same black material. Inside, visible through its translucent surface, lay something distinctly humanoid. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered behind me. I didn't turn to see who. The pod's surface captured and redirected light, creating patterns that shifted with our movement, but it was the sphere suspended above it that dominated the room's energy. It hung in mid-air, gently rotating, its surface a swirling mass of what looked like liquid metal. "Radiation levels holding steady," Anderson announced, her instruments trained on the sphere. "The energy signature it's changing, becoming more coherent." I approached the pod carefully, acutely aware of every step on the perfectly smooth floor. Our lights revealed detail after detail. Circuits or writing embedded in the black walls that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Subtle geometrical patterns that suggested a mathematical precision beyond our current capabilities. Dr. Morrison, one of the military observers, the one I'd come to think of as the leader, approached. "We need to establish a quarantine protocol before—" He was cut off by a sound, not quite mechanical, not quite organic, that emanated from everywhere at once. The sphere's rotation increased, its surface patterns accelerating. "Energy spike," Anderson's warning came just as every light and piece of equipment in the chamber flashed. The sphere flared once, and a holographic display burst into existence above the pod. The image was crystal clear, a three-dimensional star map, but unlike any configuration we'd ever seen. Constellations moved and shifted, showing what appeared to be temporal progression. And at its center, a single point flashed with the same rhythm we'd first detected weeks ago. "It's a navigation system," Winters breathed, her tablet forgotten in her hands. "But these star positions, they're wrong. Unless we're seeing them from a different time," I finished. "These configurations, they're showing us the sky as it appeared thousands of years ago." The military observers were speaking rapidly into their communications devices, but I barely noticed. My attention was fixed on the pod itself. Its surface had begun to change, becoming more transparent. The figure inside was becoming clearer, humanoid, but with subtle differences in proportion and structure that sent shivers down my spine. "Sir," Alice's voice cut through my fascination. "The other sites, they're all reporting similar activations. The pyramids in Mexico, China, they're all responding." The sphere's rotation suddenly stopped. Its surface stilled, and perfect silence fell over the chamber. Then, with a clarity that made me question whether I was hearing it with my ears or directly in my mind, a series of tones filled the space. The sequence was mathematical, precise, prime numbers, if I wasn't mistaken. A test, a greeting, a key. "It's waiting for a response," Anderson said. The military leader looked at me. "Dr. Morrison, you need to make a decision. We either shut this down now, or we answer," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "This isn't a threat. It's first contact protocols. They left this here, waiting for us to reach a level of technology that would allow us to find it and understand it." Looking at the humanoid figure in the pod, I suddenly understood more. It wasn't a body being preserved. It was an ambassador, waiting in some form of stasis for humanity to be ready for the conversation. "The others," I turned to Winters. "How many sites are responding?" 12 confirmed so far, all showing similar energy signatures, all activating in sequence. A global network, waiting for millennia. Not just guides or visitors, but a systematic project to prepare humanity for something larger. "What's our next step, Doctor?" The military leader's question carried the weight of history. I looked at the sphere, the pod, the star map still rotating above us. The answer was obvious, though its consequences would reshape human civilization. "We complete the sequence," I said. "We answer their greeting. And then we wake our visitor." The chamber seemed to glow slightly, as if in approval. Humanity's next chapter was about to begin, and standing there, in that space beneath one of our oldest monuments, I finally understood why I'd spent my career studying the past. It wasn't just about where we'd been. It was about discovering who we were meant to become. The mathematics of an alien greeting turned out to be surprisingly elegant. Anderson's team decoded the prime number sequence within hours, and our response, transmitted through carefully modulated frequencies matching the sphere's own emissions, produced immediate results. The black walls of the chamber came alive with scrolling symbols, not hieroglyphics, but something far more precise. Each character shifting between mathematical formula and what appeared to be wavelength representations. "It's a technical manual," Winters said, documenting each changing pattern on her tablet. "Look at these sequences. They're showing us how to interface with their technology." The military presence had doubled, with specialists in protective gear carefully documenting every square inch of the chamber. But their usual rigid protocols seemed to falter in the presence of technology beyond their grasp. "The pod's molecular structure is responding to the activation sequence," Anderson reported from her station. She'd rigged a quantum interference detector to monitor the crystalline surface. "It's reconfiguring itself at the atomic level." The transformation began slowly, a gradual clarity spreading through the material like ice melting in reverse. The humanoid figure became increasingly distinct. Its proportions were close enough to human to be deeply unsettling, like looking at a photograph that's been subtly altered. Biological readings are initiating, Alice called out, her eyes fixed on a specialized scanner. There's cellular activity. Whatever stasis technology they used, it's reversing. A new holographic display materialized, this one showing medical data. Scrolling diagrams of the being's internal structure revealed a biology both familiar and alien. Organs we could recognize, but with functions we could only guess at. A skeletal structure optimized for what appeared to be different gravitational conditions. Jesus, I muttered, earning a sharp look from the military observer. Sorry, professional excitement. The sphere's rotation had established a new rhythm, slower but more complex. Energy readings showed synchronized signals between it and the pod, resembling some form of wireless power transfer or data exchange. Dr. Morrison, the military leader approached, his voice low. We need to discuss containment protocols for when... A sound from the pod cut him off. Not mechanical this time, something organic. The figure inside had moved. Life signs stabilizing, Alice reported. Neural activity increasing. It's waking up. The pod's surface became completely transparent, then began to recede, flowing like liquid glass into the base. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted, not enough to trigger our hazard alerts, but noticeable enough to make everyone take an instinctive step back. Everyone, except me. I found myself moving forward, drawn by a lifetime of scientific curiosity finally facing its ultimate test. The being's eyes opened. 3 of them, arranged in a triangle pattern, each with multiple pupils that adjusted independently. It sat up with a fluid grace that suggested both excellent motor control and a profound comfort with Earth's gravity. Its skin had a subtle iridescence, like oil on water, and what I'd thought was clothing turned out to be some kind of integrated technological surface that shifted with its movements. Then it spoke. The sound was unmistakably linguistic, not the tonal communications we'd expected, but something that made Dr. Bradley, our ancient languages expert, suddenly grab my arm. That's Proto-Afroasiatic, he whispered incredulously, or something very close to it. The root language that preceded ancient Egyptian. The being continued speaking, its 3 eyes focused on our reactions. The sphere simultaneously displayed mathematical symbols, creating a dual translation system, one linguistic, one mathematical. It's brilliant, Bradley said, his academic excitement overtaking his fear. They learned our ancient languages during their time here, but they're also providing mathematical verification to ensure precise understanding. A redundant communication system. For the next 3 hours, we engaged in the most extraordinary linguistic and mathematical exchange in human history. Bradley worked to translate the ancient language, while Anderson correlated it with the mathematical symbols. The dual system allowed us to verify linguistic translations against mathematical constants, ensuring nothing was lost in translation. The military observers had gone completely silent, their weapons forgotten at their sides as they watched the impossible become routine. Even their superiors, watching through our video feeds, seemed to have forgotten to give orders. Then the being stood, its full height impressive but not intimidating, and gestured at the sphere. The holographic display expanded, showing not just our solar system, but a vast network of interconnected points stretching across multiple spiral arms of the galaxy. It's showing us their navigation network, Winters whispered. The pyramids. They're not just individual stations, they're nodes in an interstellar communications array. The being turned its 3-eyed stare directly to me and made a gesture that somehow managed to convey both invitation and warning. The sphere flashed, and new symbols appeared. More complex, more urgent. I understood then why I'd been brought to this moment. My entire career studying ancient structures had prepared me to recognize what we were really looking at. Not just a visitor or an ambassador, but a guardian. A keeper of gates we hadn't known existed, waiting for humanity to be ready for what lay beyond them. The choice facing us was clear. Remain isolated on our single world, or accept an invitation to join something larger than ourselves. The complexity of communicating with our visitor, who identified itself through Bradley's translations as something approximating observer, was matched only by the rapidly escalating situation above ground. Nations that hosted pyramid structures were reporting similar activations. The Chinese delegation is demanding immediate access to our findings, Colonel Mansour informed me quietly. We stood watching Observer interface with the sphere. Mexican authorities have secured Teotihuacan, and satellite imagery shows unusual activity at pyramid sites across Central and South America. He paused. Every nation with a significant archaeological structure is claiming this as their sovereign concern. Observer seemed to understand our political complications. Through the dual translation system, it explained that similar behaviors had marked humanity's earlier attempts at contact over 13 millennia ago. Their solution then had been to withdraw, to wait for our species to mature. But you didn't just wait, I said, watching Bradley frantically transcribe the ancient words. You left markers, guidelines. The pyramids themselves were built later, weren't they? Following your original principles. Physical constants, Observer confirmed through the translation. Universal mathematical principles first encoded in older structures, then carried forward by those who remembered. The pyramids you know came later, built by humans who maintained fragments of our mathematical knowledge. Each generation adding to the understanding, building closer to the original designs. The sphere's rotation had taken on a new pattern, its surface rippling with increasingly complex geometries. On screens throughout the chamber, monitoring stations worldwide reported matching phenomena at every activated site. The network is nearly aligned, Winters reported. Energy signatures are approaching theoretical limits for our containment systems. Observer turned its triangular gaze toward the sphere. Your species now stands at a junction. The network was designed to activate when humanity achieved sufficient technological advancement. That time has come, but the choice remains yours. Choice? Colonel Mansour asked. What choice? Through both ancient language and mathematical symbols, Observer explained. The pyramid network wasn't just for communication, it was a key to understanding quantum-level manipulation of space-time. The principles were encoded in the structures themselves, waiting to be deciphered once we developed the scientific framework to understand them. Your mathematics has finally evolved enough to grasp the fundamentals, Observer conveyed. But understanding brings responsibility. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. The sphere projected a new series of images. Star systems, some thriving with clearly artificial structures, others dark and lifeless. The message was clear. Some civilizations survived this threshold, others did not. Dr. Anderson's voice cut through our contemplation. The energy readings, they're becoming critical. Whatever's happening, it's reaching a peak. As if in response, the sphere's rotation accelerated. The black walls of the chamber began to shimmer with previously hidden patterns. The other sites are showing identical phenomena, Winters reported. Global synchronization in 3 minutes. Observer moved to the center of the chamber, its iridescent surface reflecting the sphere's light. The network will fully activate. You must choose, accept connection to the larger community of surviving civilizations, or remain isolated until the next cycle. And if we accept? Knowledge, understanding, but also scrutiny, responsibility. Your conflicts become larger, your decisions affect more than just your world. Colonel Mansour's radio crackled. After listening for a moment, his expression darkened. Multiple nations are demanding we shut down the network. Others are threatening action if we do. We're running out of time. I thought of everything we'd learned about our history, about the patient guidance left in stone and mathematics. It was never just about contact, I said slowly. The pyramids, the mathematical principles, the encoded physics, it was all a test. Not of our intelligence, but of our ability to understand and cooperate on a global scale. Observer's gesture conveyed agreement. Division leads to destruction. Unity leads to advancement. This is the universal constant we have observed across millennia. 30 seconds to synchronization, Winters announced. Colonel Mansour received another transmission. Dr. Morrison, I have direct orders to shut this down, immediately. I looked at Observer, at the sphere, at the ancient chamber that had waited so patiently for humanity to mature enough to find it. This isn't just my decision to make, I said. This affects everyone. 20 seconds. Observer's response came through both translations. It has always been everyone's decision. We provided the tools, the understanding. The choice remains with humanity, as it always has. 10 seconds. Colonel Mansour raised his hand to signal his teams. Around the world, military forces moved toward pyramid sites, ready to attempt shutdown procedures nobody understood. 5 seconds. The sphere's rotation reached its peak, reality itself seeming to bend around its frequencies. Observer remained motionless, waiting for humanity's choice. In that moment, I understood what countless civilizations before us must have realized. The true test wasn't in finding the chamber or decoding its messages. It was in what we would do with the knowledge, whether we could overcome our divisions in the face of something larger than ourselves. 1 second. The chamber filled with light, the sphere's energy connecting with every activated site worldwide. In that instant, through the mathematical precision of ancient structures and the quantum properties of advanced technology, humanity's next chapter began to write itself. Not with a bang or a whisper, but with a choice that would echo across centuries to come. Whatever came next, connection or isolation, advancement or stagnation, would depend not on any single decision, but on our collective ability to face the universe's greatest challenge, ourselves. The light faded, leaving us changed, not by the technology we'd discovered or the knowledge we'd gained, but by the understanding that our greatest hurdles had always been internal. Observer remained, ready to guide us through whatever path we'd chosen, while the sphere continued its eternal rotation, marking humanity's first tentative steps into a much larger universe. We had found our way to the threshold, but whether we could cross it together remained to be seen.